Hello, everybody. It is great to be here one more time today. My name is Gary Fowler. I'm the CEO, president, founder of GSD Get You Done Venture Studios, premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm a 17-time serial entrepreneur with several unicorns under the belt. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for 1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an AI agent tech company that I co-founded with Dr. David Yang. We believe at GSD that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. And with that, I'd like to introduce my guest, Ben Peterson. He's a co-founder and CEO of Purple Elephant Ventures, where he leads PEV's efforts to build the digital infrastructure of Africa's tourism industry. Prior, Ben was a senior partner of AHL Venture Partners, one of the largest VC firms in Africa. Ben is also founder and chair emeritus of GHR, Canada's largest international media development organization. He's got a BA and BAH. I got to ask you about that because I've never heard of that degree, from Queen's University and an MSc from London School of Economics. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ben. So Ben, what is a BAH from Queen's?
Hey Gary, how's it going? It's an honors bachelor degree. That's all that it is. Nothing too.
Okay,
fancy.
I never
Maybe
heard
it's what we do up here in Canada. I don't know.
I was going to say it's like ba. I thought, well, maybe I'm supposed to pronounce it or something. That's interesting. Okay, so how did you? First of all, we're doing a lot of work in Africa too, in places like Nigeria and places like Kenya. But how did you what made you decide? Did you wake up one day and say, listen, I'm kind of like into safaris and I want to come to Kenya? Or
well, look, I've had a 23, 24 year career in Africa now. So after I graduated from university, I ended up in Ghana on a random sort of young kid internship program, and ended up falling in love with the continent and dedicating a big chunk of my professional career to it. It's a place that is full of opportunities, both financial and moral, frankly, to make the world a better place and to also grow successful businesses. So yeah, the last chapter of my sort of career began 10 years ago when I moved to Kenya, where I've been ever since. It's as the hub of East African tech and startups. It's a really cool place to be. But you catch me right now in Canada. I'm actually back in Toronto, where I'm originally from. I spend the vast majority of my year in Nairobi.
Interesting. Yeah, I met Liko Dangote's brother, Sayud Ndata. I actually had dinner with him. He's my neighbor down in Florida, so he invited me over to his polo field, and I spent time with him. And he's one of the wealthiest guys in Africa, was interesting. Actually, we have developed a pretty good relationship with him. So
awesome.
We have about 180 companies now in GSD, and we've probably got 30 of them in Africa now.
Very cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of, Africa's the startup scene and the tech scene in Africa is one with where there's gold at the end of the rainbow, but there is a lot of potholes in order to get to the end of the rainbow. And so we're understanding how to navigate the whole world over in my part of the planet is a challenge, but makes it super exciting.
Yeah, there's probably I lived in Russia for 12 years, and the Ukraine, Belarus, myself pre 2015, and there was a lot of opportunity there, but there were potholes. Well, there's a lot more potholes now than there were then. But it was interesting because it's like somebody said, "What's it like there?" And I said, "You ever see Forrest Gump? Every day's like a box of chocolates, and you never know what you get." That's kind of like what it's like, right? I'm sure you have some of the same experiences as an expat.
100%.
And then how did you assimilate into the culture? what did you, because it's vast, like, what are some of the things that are vastly different in Kenya that are not they're not normal in Kenya or in Canada, but they're very normal in Kenya? What kind of things, like culturally? Because it's important to assimilate, right, and accommodate.
No, 100%. And look, the Kenyan culture, and it's look, it's hard for me to. I don't want to draw too broad of generalizations here. I'm a bit conscious of that, but generally, I would say Kenyan culture tends to be very introverted. People there are very quiet and respectful, and so it requires it's a different it's a very different approach there than the sort of extroverted North American approach that I and probably you, Gary, take to the table, right, when we're doing business. So it requires a lot of, for me anyway, has required a lot of work on listening and being as respectful as humanly possible in business conversations and negotiations.
Is it easier to do, since you're from Canada, is it easier to do business there compared to being a Kenyan? Because I saw some of that, they would value, they put a, especially since, from Silicon Valley, right? So they would put a value on it. They would lift you up a bit and it changed things. Is it the same in Kenya?
Yeah, there's two forces at play. There's definitely the force that looks at you and says, okay, well, because you're from North America, the stereotype is that we are wealthier and have sort of a level of we can make other people more successful quickly. On the other hand, there's a lot of pushback in the startup community right now in Kenya around foreign controlled startups, and so there's a big push to really try to support and fund startups that are founded by locals as opposed to foreigners. So there's push and pulls on both sides of that for us. I think right now it's a bit of a wash, but it's an interesting dynamic. There certainly has been a lot of worry that most of the funding in the startup community has gone to foreign led startups. That has obviously hasn't resonated particularly well with a lot of the local startup founders that are struggling to raise capital. And that's something that we all have to do a better job at. As a former investor and now as an entrepreneur, always have to try to figure out how to build up the local community as much as humanly possible, rather than taking all of the having it really as a foreign. There's a risk that the whole industry is a foreign controlled one in Kenya, which is not long-term sustainable or just the right thing to do.
We say, we're so GSDs in 80 countries, as I said today, but if you look at it, there's really three things: operational expertise, access to capital, and networking contacts. Being in Silicon Valley 39 years and living in Palo Alto, you see it all the time. Every day, it's amazing. You're walking down the street and Zuckerberg's there, or Tim Cook's at the Starbucks. People that you just hear about. You're at Stanford and you're talking to them, right? And that one break changes everything. I was walking down the in university in Palo Alto, and I met my partner David Yang, one of the most successful AI entrepreneurs, was walking down the street and said to me, "Hey, listen, I'm looking for a co-founder and CEO of my new company. Do you know anybody?" 5 days later, I came back. We cut a deal and we started a company together.
Yeah.
Sold it. It was acquired. So those kind of things are important, and sometimes we forget, right? It's not this the one thing about Silicon Valley. It's not really a place. It's an ecosystem that it's like a port to the rest of the world. You bring people in and people out. Raising money is a whole lot different there. The valuations are a lot higher. Why? Because people get it. And
Yeah,
then
100%. And look, in Nairobi, we're starting to try to build that as well, right? That ecosystem of and the flywheel effect of growing these ecosystems. There's a reason why Nairobi is sort of nicknamed the Silicon Savannah. It's way smaller, obviously, than what's going on in your part of the world, but we're starting to see a bit of the flywheel effect take place in Nairobi as the number of startups have grown, the number of investors have grown, starting to see some success out of the initial batch of startups that have come out of Kenya. And same thing goes with Nigeria, with some big successes out of Lagos, and a few other places in Africa. But really, the startup world in Africa tends to, for exactly the reasons you have described, the ecosystem effect, the buildup of that ecosystem effect has tended to really concentrate itself in Nairobi and in Lagos.
One of the things that I see, right? I have Stanford MBAs, Harvard MBAs, MIT MBAs, folks from Waterloo. I mean, you name it. Doctors, MDs, and PhDs from places like Yale, Cambridge, et cetera. But the one thing they're like in a silo, right? Because what happens when you're building, and I've done it, right, 17 times. You're building a company, you're so freaking focused on building your company, you don't have the chance to look around you and up and down to figure out what's going on. You don't have time to network. You're too busy,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things that I understand is that you can be. I have companies from Stanford University, right? One of my companies called Zempli, and I co-founded that company. I'm the co-founder of Zempli, which is a remote patient monitoring company. But if you have the contacts and network, even though you've gone to top tier university, doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. It's like there's like three gates to get in the gate, because one is if that's you're going to Stanford or Harvard or Waterloo, you go through gate one, or Queens. Next thing you go down through, and having a couple of unicorns behind you helps out. The third thing is, these people that have $1 billion can change things, because 99% of the wealth is 1% of the population. You need one break with those folks, those family offices. One of the reasons we started my family office, GSD, is because I said, I'm an entrepreneur and operator just like you, right? And I'm sure you feel the same way. And the thing is, the system's screwy. It doesn't work. It's like only 10% of the VCs in general have ever built a company. Only 10.
Yeah.
So
Which is ridiculous, right?
It's
In
nuts.
my opinion, the best investors are also really good operators. You have to understand both sides in order to make it work. But similarly, being as a former VC, that experience I think has made me a better entrepreneur on this side, because I understand how investors think.
I
It's
agree.
allowed me to access the capital required to make these things run. And back to my original point around, the challenges of local entrepreneurs in Kenya, one of the massive challenges they have is they lack the networks required to raise the capital, because unfortunately most of the capital in the startup community in Africa comes from outside of Africa. And so it's really hard for a lot of those folks to make connections and build bonds with the people that are actually writing checks, right? So that's why these sort of ecosystem approaches are so important, actually connecting people on the ground, exposing different people from totally different parts of the world to each other, to come up with a common solution, common purpose to work together.
I agree. And the thing is, most people don't realize it. That's a big challenge, right? I say it's like having a Ferrari in the garage. You got to get the Ferrari out. There's one thing about taking it in the neighborhood driving around, but there's another thing about winning Formula One.
Yeah.
And so if you've won Formula One a couple of times, it's surely easier to get sponsors. And what do you need to win the race? You need the right pit crew, you need the right tires, you need the right transmission, the right aerodynamics. There's a lot of things. And if somebody's already won the race a few times, they can say, listen, go around that corner, be careful. There's an oil slick there sometimes. You don't want to spin out.
Yeah.
And it's easier if you've won the race to get sponsors to come in, right?
For sure.
I raised, so because of my partner, David Yang, and some of the successes we had, we raised $7 million in less than 3 months,
Yeah.
right? And not a lot of money, but we didn't have a product. Why? Because people, they bank on success. If you had a couple of successes, it's a whole lot easier.
For sure. No, 100% agreed.
And so, I see it in Africa too. I'm going to be coming down actually in the near term to Lagos to speak. But let's talk about it. What sparked your interest in tourism technology, and why did you specifically choose Africa tourism sector. I mean, most people don't realize Africa's got 1.1 billion people, 54 countries, right? Just
Yep.
Nigeria has probably 270 million today. It's
Yep.
not small, and it's the largest population growing under 30 in the world.
100%.
And so, but why did you pick the tourism sector? I have some ideas, but why was that for you? Why did you decide that's the place I
Yeah,
want?
look, as I said before I started Purple Elephant Ventures, I was senior partner at a VC fund called AHL. And at AHL, we were kind of top of the food chain. In the venture world, we got all the deal flow. And so most of that deal flow came through me. And I saw thousands of startups in fintech, in energy, and education, and blah, 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 all the sectors. But when we mapped it out, we actually saw virtually zero deal flow in tourism. And tourism is the third largest sector on the African continent, about $200 billion a year industry. But virtually zero startups that have ever raised capital to tackle the problems of that big industry. The other advantage of the tour, so there was a big opportunity um, uh, sitting there in tourism, first of all. Secondly, the dynamics in the industry make it very appealing, in that you have a lot of big players in tourism that make a lot of money, um, but that are desperate for support to run their businesses more efficiently. And so you have clients that can actually pay in tourism on the African continent. And unfortunately, a lot of the other industries in Africa, the more consumer focused industries in Africa, really struggle with the buying power of their end customers, which really make a lot of consumer focused businesses in Africa very low margin, and very difficult. It's very difficult to scale there as well. So um, I looked at the tourism industry, thought, wow, this is, as I started digging in more and more and more, I thought, wow, this is a big fat opportunity that nobody is taking up. And so instead of building just what a normal person would do is just focus on one business and build that. But what we decided to do was build a venture studio that would allow us to build basically venture studio is a platform business that allows us to build and then grow multiple businesses simultaneously. So look, our mission at Purple Elephant is to build the digital infrastructure required to unlock the full potential of Africa's tourism industry. Okay. And we do that as a collective approach across multiple startups. So currently we have 5 startups. We're about to launch a 6th startup. Each of those businesses are solve part of the B2B challenges that that exist in the industry. So, for example, we have a business that does a digital booking. It's a digital booking technology, back-end digital booking system. We have a procurement business. We have an HR business. So we're trying to solve the biggest needs of tourism operators and solve them in a way that is both scalable and highly impactful as well. Look, we're relatively new. Purple Elephant Ventures have been around for a couple of years now, but we've raised more money than by a long shot than any other tourism startup in Africa. We're growing very rapidly, and we are having a lot of fun and success as we go. And we think that the opportunity is huge for us because the needs are so high, because our clients can afford what we're offering, and because in the vast majority of cases we have no competition for what we are doing. So the stars are aligning for us right now from a business model perspective. We're just heads down focused on executing that strategy at the moment.
So, what do you do for fun in Africa, by the way?
Oh, well, look, Lots, and especially because I'm in tourism, it
Yeah,
makes
I'm gonna say,
life a little bit easier, right?
so
So
what do you do? Like, tell me, what do you do for fun?
I have two little kids and a wife, and what we love to do is go on safari. So at least once a month, we're out in the bush, usually in the Masai Mara, which is the big game park in Kenya, where we'll go and hang out with lions and giraffes and zebras and have a great time. But Kenya also has some of the best beaches in the world, so we love going to the
Really?
beaches.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
Kenyan beaches are beautiful along the in that whole east coast of Africa has some incredible beaches. People know about Zanzibar and Tanzania, but in my opinion, Kenya has better beaches than are in Zanzibar. And so, yeah, we travel to the beach a lot, and there's always fun things to do.
Now, do the elephants, and because I know some places on the coast, the animals go to the coast, large animals go out to the beaches and go in the water. Do they do that in Kenya too, or not?
Not as much anymore. Unfortunately, the coast has been developed a little bit, but you get some parts of the coast in Kenya have elephants within a 30 or 45-minute drive. Um, yeah, but you'd have to go further south, probably into more remote parts of the continent to have the animals go up on the beach and stuff. But yeah, it's an exciting place. Definitely, you get all the elements together. With beach and bush and culture, endless activities to keep us entertained for sure.
Is your wife from Kenya or is she from Canada?
She's from Canada. We met
And
before.
so, how is it raising kids in Kenya? How different is it than Canada?
Uh, Good question. I think we love raising our kids there. In Nairobi, we have great schools, great international schools. So their schooling is equivalent to what it would be here in Canada. And the weather being perfect all year round here or in Kenya is makes life easier. Not a lot of having to spend half an hour putting our kids into snowsuits every day. And so yeah, it's a pretty idyllic life. We have a pretty idyllic place to raise kids, and the experiences, the sort of the global view that they're getting, I think, is a really important aspect of how we're raising our kids. We want them to understand the world for what it is, good, bad, and ugly. And I think that's really hard to do if you're in a more isolated situation in North America. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we're coming up to the top of the show, Ben. So closing thoughts and how do people get a hold of you?
Come find me at purpleelephant.ventures. And I will be, yeah, you can, find me on our website or find me on LinkedIn as well. And I would love to connect with anybody who's interested in African tourism.
Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. Ben, if you want to stay on for a few minutes after the show, we can talk. And
Great,
thanks to
Gary.
all of you for joining one more time. GSD presents Top Global Startups. My name is Gary Fowler, and I am your host. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. We will be back to you again soon with another exciting edition. Thanks, Ben, and thanks to all of you for joining us. And thanks, look and subscribe, like and subscribe, and look at our show. We're coming up with another exciting edition later on today. Thank you.